This is Tom Fox. Welcome to the newest edition in the Compliance Podcast Network, my latest podcast, Compliance and Coronavirus. As the voice of compliance, I wanted to start a podcast which will help bring both clarity and sanity to the field of compliance, the compliance practitioner, and indeed the compliance profession during this worldwide health and healthcare crisis. Taking up a variety of topics as diverse as working from home, to sporting events, to the role of the board of directors, to crisis management, to the role of supply chains. We will look at all of these in this podcast. If you have a topic you'd like covered on compliance and coronavirus, please let me know. I'd be happy to do a podcast on it. In today's episode, I have Maurice Gilbert. Maurice is the founder of Conselium. Conselium is one of the top executive search firms in America, and it focuses on chief compliance officers and compliance professionals. We take a look at the hiring process now for both corporations and for candidates during the time of coronavirus. I know you will find it useful. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for another episode, and today I have with me Maurice Gilbert. Maurice and I have known each other for quite a while. I think back into actually the last decade, or the first decade of this century, I should say. So, Maurice, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to visit with me today.
Looking forward to it, Tom.
So, Maurice, what are you up to these days?
Well, of course, I'm doing executive search in the compliance space, and I'm also doing executive coaching. So there's a little bit of a lull currently due to the COVID situation. And a lot of executives ask me for career advice. So that's one of the things I've been doing to, as we go through a little bit of a lull here. But there are some activities on the search side, and in particular, I've completed some searches in Asia Pacific region, countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Turkey, have done some searches most recently in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. And we're being asked to do some searches in Africa, just completed a search in Morocco. So there are some regions of the world that are still quite active, and I would call those emerging markets.
So I wanted to ask you, Maurice, about obviously the coronavirus health crisis, but also the economic downturn and the challenges that has put in front of compliance professionals. In terms of the hiring process, what are some of the top three challenges you've seen?
Well, firstly, I have seen some companies, unfortunately, that are not and never have been quite serious about compliance. I have seen some do some contracting in a blatant, let's say, across the board, we're going to cut, 50% of our workforce. So unfortunately, I've seen a little bit of that, not that much. The other dynamic I'm seeing is some searches that we've been asked to engage on have been put on hold, rightly so. And there's another dynamic. I'm seeing some professionals not being receptive to opportunities right now that we've reached out to due to the uncertainty. So the bottom line is hiring authorities certainly need to be creative at this moment until this crisis plays out, and certainly need to be concerned primarily as they look to hire to address the safety issues of professionals, and those are expressed specifically by the professionals, and hiring authorities need to be attentive to see if they could accommodate those those issues that are expressed specifically, and they are different amongst each professional. So those are some observations I see there.
Maurice, if I could switch over to the compliance officer, the CCO side of the equation, and you mentioned you're doing professional coaching. So I wanted to ask maybe what should a CCO or compliance professional be thinking about now in terms of employability? Is there anything different they should be doing? And then maybe do you even see the skill set for a CCO changing in the age of coronavirus?
That's a great question. So first and foremost, whether it's this crisis that we're all confronted with or whether there is stability, the main thing I see is that whether it's the chief compliance officer or others like VP level, director level, I see a demand for constantly reinventing oneself. And I actually have a sign on my desk that I look at every day to that effect, that you constantly have to be reinventing yourself to be relevant and to be highly sought after in the market. In particular, here are some observations that I see. And this has been trending for a while, and it continues to be important, that the paradigm of the compliance officer has to be a business partner. They're there to educate and inform the business leaders on how to be attentive to risk and how to take ownership of risk. Because effective compliance departments are not effective if they're thought of as the taking ownership of compliance. That really needs to be pushed out to the business itself, and the compliance professionals need to do that and educate and let the business owners take on that responsibility, because it's their job, and that's the only way a compliance program could really be effective, if it's pushed down to the business level. A few other dynamics I see that facilitate somebody being very, very high-level successful as a compliance officer is they need to be a great communicator. And this could be sharpened up by making a point to do public speaking and really become a student of how to present ideas. Because what we do as compliance officers is we sell ideas, we sell concepts, and one really needs to be very top of the line in their communications to do that effectively. A few other dynamics that I see, being a project manager, because compliance officers have an idea of something they wish to accomplish, but they need to be and harness the effectiveness of their team as far as really rolling out programs in an effective manner. So project management really becomes a key skill set in doing so. Few other things of note, a compliance officer really wants to study data analytics and become fluent on how data analytics could help the compliance program in general. Now, I'm not talking about this person becoming a technology expert, but understanding how big data could be harnessed And I've seen situations like with a client of ours, like Teva Pharmaceutical, and they partnered with E&Y on a big data project to manage third-party risk. And they actually wrote up a case study, which is available. So that is becoming increasingly important as we have access to data, but you have to harness that data to help facilitate a cohesive compliance program. One other final thought perhaps would be compliance professionals need to be plugged in, is a term I use. They have to be reading constantly. They have to be reading publications like Corporate Compliance Insights, which I founded over 10 years ago. They have to be reading your book, which is in its second edition, FCPA. I don't know the exact term. Help me out here. But it's your second edition, I believe, of FCPA compliance. So they need to be basically a student of the game. They need to be constantly reading, attending conferences, really being plugged in, because the world changes at lightning speed. So those are some general observations I see that I think professionals want to stay very cognizant of.
Maurice, if I could change the focus just a little bit, you were one of the early adopters of social media in the compliance field by founding Corporate Compliance Insights. How would you say social media has changed the hiring process really up to 2020 and perhaps even beyond?
Well, great question. Social media, of course, you have tools like LinkedIn, so I'm not quite sure if that's what you may be referring to. But I see these social platforms that facilitate in-house recruiting teams to be able to reach out to talent directly. I see that as, a somewhat new phenomenon. I see situations in which sometimes companies are reviewing the social postings of professionals to see if there's any red flags. And I know of one particular situation. It didn't happen with one of our searches, but I was talking to another recruiter, and he alerted me that one of his candidates was making comments of a personal nature on a site, and they were kind of, I'd say, alt-right in nature. And so, we have to be vigilant and careful and use discretion, because you could be saying things on the internet that could come back to bite you. So that's a situation that I've become somewhat familiar with. So those are some observations that I've seen as far as social media are concerned.
Maurice, you mentioned one of the things a candidate or potential candidate in the compliance field can do is to raise their profile, would be writing articles on a site like CCI, or contributing, I should say, or contributing to other compliance sites in an overall discussion. Is that something that you find helpful to raise a candidate's profile, or is it really agnostic?
No, those are some very critical things. So again, let's review raising one's profile. You need to be attending the compliance congresses, and there's ways to do it. You could, if you don't have the confidence just yet, you could attend as an attendee. Once you build up some confidence, if it takes a while, you could present. That's imperative to be really seen, and perhaps as a speaker, be seen as a subject matter expert. Being perhaps afforded the opportunity to participate in one of your podcasts is another venue. Writing articles for a publication is clearly another venue. And one should be very cognizant also of taking on assignments within your own company that may be, quote, outside of your normal scope of work, but may afford you greater visibility. I remember when I worked at GE, I can't remember the specific opportunity, but there was an opportunity to do something. I think it was a volunteer project. And it garnered me greater visibility among the executives because they were keen on sponsoring this. So there's a myriad of ways of garnering that visibility, and certainly building out your network is important. Your network of professionals, colleagues. There's a great book that I read years ago. I forgot the author's name, but the title of the book is Dig Your Well Before You Get Thirsty. So building out a network is another way to gain visibility with your colleagues. So those are some ideas there.
Maurice, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I was wondering if anyone wanted to contact you with follow-up or questions, how could they do so?
Sure. My phone number, the best number to reach me is 214-213-8875. And then my business email is maurice@conselium.com. And if that's on my profile, on my LinkedIn profile, that information as well. So if somebody didn't quite garner that right now, all they need to do is go to Maurice Gilbert and on LinkedIn, and they'll see my entire profile, articles I've written, things I've done, and that information.
Maurice, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me. And as we move towards the second half or into the second half of 2020 and perhaps 2021, I hope I could call upon you for some more guidance around the executive hiring process during this time.
It's my pleasure, Tom. I always enjoy our conversations and always look to participate with you because you've created a great vehicle for our community in general, both as an author and conducting these podcasts and your speaking engagements. So I love to be associated with people at the front end, and it's always a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Compliance and Coronavirus. This is the only B2B podcast which brings clear and sane information for both the compliance professional and the business executive. If I could ask you to do one thing, if you could tell one person about this podcast, I'm trying to get the word out about this most unique podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network. So if you could tell one person about it, send them a copy, send them a link, and do something to help me publicize this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. Compliance and Coronavirus is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network, and it appears Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each week. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode.